Okay, good morning, everyone. Just letting people into the room, so give us a few seconds while people join. Looks like we've got a good, strong attendance this morning from lots of familiar faces on the call as well. So that's nice. Nice to see you all this morning. Thanks for joining us. Or it may not be morning. In some cases, it's the afternoon. In some cases, it's about lunchtime. We've got a brilliant international session today for you. So we've got somebody in Australia. We've got somebody in the Middle East, and we've got somebody in London, and obviously you've got me. So yeah, we're going to be talking about records. So I'll introduce the speakers, and we'll get straight into it. So we've got, if I start with Chulu, Chulu Kamalondo, who is a fellow cyclist and a great friend of mine, who's very kindly agreed to join us from the evening time in Australia, right on the other side of the world. So he's already had his Tuesday, just as I've just got out of bed. Chulu emailed me at 8:30 this morning and said, "Have you started the call yet?" I said, "I'm not, I'm still in bed." He's got an incredible career pedigree. He's worked on the Olympic Park, where he worked on the velodrome, which, as we're both cyclists, that's quite an impressive job to have worked on. It's a brilliant project to have been part of. There's the Crossrail project, which he worked on in London before moving to Sydney, where he also worked on some rapid transit systems, and now he works for Sydney Water. So Chulu's got a massive pedigree in terms of major projects around the world. We have James Bowling, barrister at leading construction barrister set in London for Pump Court. James is an experienced construction barrister who I think we may have had on a thing before. Certainly we've done some work with James in the past. Also another exceptional career. The great thing, as I always say about barristers, is somebody's always written something nice about them. So some of the things that people have said about James are he mixes intelligence with tenacity. He's strong on the law, meticulous over the facts, and a brilliant performer in court. And he has an encyclopedic brain. So looking forward to hearing from James this morning. And we've got Khalid Yousri, who runs the Dubai or Middle East operations for Diales. Khalid also very kindly joined us as a speaker and a sponsor of our masterclass in Riyadh recently. He specialises in the analysis of delay on construction projects and is based in Dubai. And also something I try and find interesting facts out about people before they join us. And the interesting fact about Khalid that I found out was that the highest scaffold he's ever climbed was 10 stories high, which to me doesn't sound that high, actually. Has that increased at all? Are you still at 10 stories, or is that?
I think it's decreased a
bit. Are you okay with heights? Is heights an issue for you?
Absolutely.
So we'll jump straight into the questions. So as I say, records this morning, and it's something that's everybody goes on about. As I say, back in 1979, I think it was, or was 75, I can't remember, one or the other, but Max Abrahamson wrote that famous quote, which is the first thing that people will learn when they get involved in a construction dispute, is the importance of records, the importance of records, and the importance of records. So we're going to find out why they're still such an issue. So, Chulu, as you're our live project and industry expert, having worked on all these high profile projects around the world, what examples have you got, and what experience have you got of keeping and managing project records that stand out from your career, and what are you seeing at the moment?
Yeah, no, thanks a lot, Stuart, for the introduction, and thanks a lot, everyone, for tuning in. It's really a great topic, which we will go through. So I'll start off by looking at industry-wide, not just construction, but every other industry, pharmaceutical industry, manufacturing. All of them actually have the need for requirement to actually keep good records, mainly for you to look at what you've actually signed up to do. Then secondly, how you're doing it. Then three, if anything goes wrong, it's easy for the legal system to actually judge who's actually, or come to a fair and equitable position in terms of what needs to be done going forward. So with records, it's in the construction industry, it normally starts way before the construction phase, which is pretty much a business case proposition. So you're looking at why you're actually doing the project. So that is actually agreed upon within the organization to take you forward. Then you have the procurement strategies, you have other documents like scope documentation, you've got design documentation, tender documentation, executed contracts, site diaries for day-to-day works in terms of how you're actually progressing on the project. You have the program, which is actually giving you an indication in terms of when you need to start and when you need to finish the project, and that governs a lot of things in the private sector for financing on other sides, because you have to have an end date. So that needs to be quite clear in terms of the start and completion date. You have payment claims, change logs, formal communication, bonds, warranties, escrow agreement, as-built, operation manuals. So all this is quite important. But what needs to be very important and precise in documents is a clear outline of what needs to be recorded. So if it's, for example, payment claims, you need to know the cost of works done to date. I've worked more in NEC contracts, where it's very prescribed. Every month you have a periodic payment, and that periodic payment has to link back to what you had forecasted to do in the month against what you've actually completed. So the payment claim is supposed to be very clear in terms of what you've done against what you had forecasted before. You have other documents like change logs. Those need to be clear. So if, say, for example, the client says there's something that needs to be changed, it needs to have a very clear message in terms of why the change has come about, who's going to cost it, and what that impact is going to be on the program, construction program. So that's a very good way of actually having that document. You've got things like early warning notices in NEC contracts. Those early warning notices need to be very clear and concise as well in terms of telling the story in terms of there's a problem here on site. This is what we need to do, and we come together as a group and we decide saying this is the outcome of our decision, and we're going to go forward with that. So all those documents I've actually just outlined there are some examples of good ways of doing it. The bad ways of doing it is in scenarios where you have a problem and it's just a one sentence. Say, for example, you have latent conditions, and just say latent conditions. It doesn't show in terms of what was actually allowed for in the contract, because you could have allowed for maybe a certain percentage of latent conditions and what has actually transpired on site. So it's very good to actually outline what the difference is in terms of what you're actually asking for in terms of such things. Then beyond that, you have a repository of information where this information is going to be used past the completion date. So things like as-builts and operation manuals. These are records which are actually going to be used in the lifespan of the asset once it's handed over for operation. So all these documents actually form a huge part of document collection, which is supposed to be very clear and concise in terms of how those documents are actually recorded.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, so essentially what you're saying is clarity works.
Yeah.
Lack of clarity is not great. Which
yes.
is exactly where we get to with that. So, and then, so just leading on from that, so do you think technology is a good answer to the problem? Will technology solve everything that we need to do, or would we be better going back to paper and pen? And I was just thinking while you were talking about that kind of writing stuff down and keeping records of the first project I got involved with on this thing, where they had a clerk of works whose job was just to go around and record what was going on site each day. Do you think we should go back to that kind of thing, having somebody dedicated to it? So, Chulu, if we'd start with you and then maybe ask the others what they think.
We're still doing part of that as technology is actually developing, but technology is developing quite quick. So you have things like BIM, you have things like blockchain technology, which is actually developing quite quick. And like we've touched in the past with James, and James obviously will talk maybe around this a little bit more. AI obviously coming on board. But if I talk mainly on BIM, because obviously BIM is not just, a lot of people look at BIM as just a 3D modeling of project, but it's not that. It's a repository of a lot of information. So it's asset tagging, it's looking at the model itself. Then there's a lot of things that add on to BIM. But that is a repository of that information, which is proving to be a lot more effective in doing that than what we've done in the past, and it looks like it's working. So if you look at the big infrastructure projects like Crossrail, Olympic Park, most of the assets are asset tagged, which is very easy for maintenance. You can go back, you can just tag on a little tag, and it will show you what's behind that, and you can work around how you maintain your assets. Maintenance becomes easy pretty much. If you look at the development of blockchain technology, and I know blockchain technology at the moment is working around cryptocurrencies, and a lot of people are focused on cryptocurrency. But blockchain technology is at the moment being adopted even by the medical field, because they know that they can attach those medical records to a certain code, which can never be manipulated in the future. So we're looking at possibly blockchain technology coming into things like contracts, formation of contract and signing of contracts. Once you sign a contract, it's actually held in blockchain technology. So yes, we are still working within the old realm of how we used to do things, but we're slowly developing into the new technologies in terms of how we're doing things. And we can't shy away that technology will definitely enhance in terms of what we're doing. It will make a lot more efficient in terms of what we're doing.
And James, did you have some thoughts on the use of tech?
Yes, I mean, in terms of should we go back to pen and paper and just rely on the clerk of works site diary? When it comes to decision making, Joseph Stalin once said, of course, that it doesn't matter how people vote, it matters who counts the votes, to which anyone who's been involved in a big organization will know that by parity of reasoning, it doesn't matter who attends the meeting, it matters who writes the minutes. And the clerk of works's notes, therefore, are always shaped, seems to me, towards a particular end. That's good if they're your notes or your clerk of works. It's less good if you're on the other end of it. We've now got to a stage, I think, whereby, whether we like it or not, technology is creating a massive records, probably more than we need or want. Technology is therefore giving us better records in the sense that more is being recorded contemporaneously, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those better records are more manageable. And one of the advantages of the clerk of works' diary is, of course, is that, at least by his lights, everything that he thought was important was written down in that diary, and that was your primary source of information. As time has gone on, email, instant messaging, a lot of things we're going to talk about today have all come to supplement that for good or for ill. That's here to stay, whether we like it or not. The problems, I think, with having better information in the sense of more is that it's not necessarily manageable. Technology is great at achieving a specific goal, more records. It's not necessarily great at telling you how that specific goal should be achieved so that what you've got is digestible at the end of it. And I often see disputes whereby the problem is not that you've got not enough information, but that you've often got too much and that you're trying to marshal it in a sensible way. Subject to the AI question, which we'll come on to in a minute, no piece of software is going to tell you, from the massive information that you've got in emails and text messages and attachments and so on and so forth, whether the meeting on the 1st of January is the one that counts, whether the emails that people sent immediately before or after the meeting about the agenda are accurate, how to resolve a discrepancy between what was contemporaneously written down by two people at that meeting, how to reconcile the conflicts and discrepancies within their recollections, or indeed whether or not what they discussed at that meeting was in fact important for the critical path or the project or the claim or whatever it may be. So the answer is, I think, is we've got a lot more kit, but can we use it effectively? And the answer, I think, is, like, as Chulu says, is there are only two ways to organize this. You can either organize it at the time, and that involves an upfront friction cost, which people don't always want to pay. I think we'll come on to that later. Or you can pay the likes of Khalid and even me to try and untangle that mess after the event, that is less reliable for a number of reasons. One is it's just much harder to do it. But if anyone's ever tried to file their tax return, you know when you're sitting there trying to unscramble the box full of receipts that you've kept through the year and not sorted out, it's much, much harder to do it at the end of the year with all the records than it is to just spend a little bit of time each day filing things in the right place. Doesn't necessarily mean you learn from that experience for the next year, but that certainly that runs through everybody's mind when they're trying to sort records out after the event. The second is that when you come to it after the event, and you try and untangle it either via Khalid or the legal team or whatever it may be, it's much less reliable because you have the ultimate dispute in mind. And so you bring to that record your preconception of what should or shouldn't be important, which may or may not be, of course, what people thought were important at the time. And so there is a shaping of the record that goes on by trying to untangle it after the event, because you know what's coming, whereas people at the time, of course, didn't. So doing it at the time is better. People don't do it at the time because of cost and associated with that. That can make a dispute much more difficult to resolve. Very interested when Chulu talked about the NEC forms of contract. For a very long time, people in the legal world in particular were very evangelical about NEC. They used to say NEC is amazing. You don't have disputes under NEC. My own slightly more cynical and jaded view was that might be for two other reasons, not necessarily because they're brilliant forms of contract, although undoubtedly they're very good. The first is that because of the way it's written, it's much harder to understand what some of those clauses mean, and nobody wants to be the first person to take those clauses on and actually decide what the answer was. And secondly, more relevantly to what we're talking about today, the NEC is very, very hot on contemporaneous records, contemporaneous decisions, and a constant updating of the program and the cost of the job as you go along. And that's great. You're doing a big civil engineering project and you use NEC3 and you pay for the project team to keep those records, you will either avoid disputes or minimize them and put them forward in a digestible form where they can be decided as you go along in the project. What's terrible is if you have an NEC project and you don't accept paying that upfront cost to keep those good records, and so they are not kept at the time, the contract simply does not anticipate that you won't keep those records, with the result that if you try and get the likes of me or Khalid to come along afterwards and work out what the merits are of your dispute, because the contract anticipates you having created documents in the course of the job that are just not there, because you didn't, it is impossible to tell you whether you're on the right or wrong end of a dispute. That is not advice that anybody likes to give. So I think the answer is pen and paper is still relevant. People's contemporaneous notes are still relevant. It's never going to be your sole source anymore. We'll come on to how people use WhatsApps and things later on. But the key is not getting enough material. You now definitely have enough material. It's whether or not you're going to accept the upfront cost of marshalling it effectively in real time, or you're going to defer that cost to the end of the project when it may be much greater and your resulting claims may be much more uncertain as a result. But that's sort of the next few questions that I think we'll come to. That's what I'm seing in terms of the dilemmas of record keeping.
Right.
It hasn't touched on AI, which is a whole nother topic, and we are told AI may solve all these problems for us. And I suppose I can just give just one really simple example of that slightly terrifying story, which I read about the other day, which is an author, I can't remember his name, but he fed his manuscript into, I think it was ChatGPT or Bard, one of the AI bots, and he fed his new manuscript for his new novel into AI and asked it to give him a 2-page critique of the draft as it then stood. And it told him what was good, bad, and indifferent about his plot, his characters, and the ending. And he found that very interesting, slightly terrifying. They'd done it in 30 seconds. But he was absolutely terrified when he then gave the same manuscript to his very well-respected and very well-liked editor, who was an authority in the industry, who ultimately, after much work, gave him the same 2 pages notes. And so AI had broken that very large body of information down and given him the key takeaways in less than a minute. Whether that means that we are all stood on the cusp of a new industrial revolution and we just don't know it yet, or whether we are like Prometheus bringing fire down from Mount Olympus and we are about to feel the great revenge of the gods upon us all for playing with toys that we do not yet understand, is probably the subject of another talk entirely.
So brilliant. Just before we hear from Khalid and his views on that, just let me share this from LinkedIn this morning. The world famous Chris Hallam posted something on LinkedIn in which he said, sometimes it's better to let a human rather than AI choose the photo for your news story, with the article about discrimination at work and a well-known pair of actors that, apart from anything else, you'd have to be a certain age to get that cultural reference. Mind you, the Times readers might know it, but yeah, I just thought that was quite relevant to the conversation at this stage. So, Khalid, how about you? What's your view? Tech or paper? What would you prefer?
Yeah, I think, sure, it's really important for us first to understand the purpose or the objective of the technology and the construction industry in general. So I think we all agree that the main purpose is to make our life easier and to try to provide a better records keeping and even keep it for a longer time so that it provides much better efficiency, I would say, to the overall process of the construction cycle. So understanding the purpose of the technology is really important before we start using it. And before we get to start using it, I think it's really important also to understand the features of each software and how to maximize the benefit out of using it and how to use it. So how to use it is also an important topic where we often see some contractors or clients in the construction cycle using the softwares without really understanding how it works properly. So that's another thing that it really needs to be in place before we decide to use such software or such technology in the industry or in the construction. Once the main issue usually we face and records keeping, let's say that there is various versions of the story, and I wouldn't be exaggerating when I say that everyone might have his own story of what actually happened, and you even come to see some verbal instructions or agreements between some parties where it's not recorded anywhere and it's not really substantiated why this happened that way. So I think it is the main purpose of technology in general and records keeping is to minimize the storytelling of the project and to try to provide a better version of what actually happened during the project from its start to completion. So we can see in the industry currently or in any construction project various technologies and various softwares where it helps with the design and engineering, it helps with planning and programming, it helps with even payment evaluations and cost control of the project, and even to the daily progress record of the site, where it records what's going on in terms of number of resources and progress of the construction and engineering and even supply chain or procurement. So I think the challenge now, or not the challenge actually, it is the next step that we started to see in the construction industry recently is the integration between the various softwares together, so that we need to get the softwares to speak to each other, so that the story is really complete in a certain way of what the design said and what the progress was and what actually the cost, the cash flow or the payment evaluations, how it was provided and when, and of course the implementation of that on the planning side as well. So yeah, I think we are on the right direction to a certain limit, and we can see the improvement in the industry in general in using such technologies in the right way. But the investment in the technology is really important. Understanding what the technology is about is the key of maximize the benefit out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know the guys at NEMA in the UK have done a lot of work on that kind of integration of software and getting things to talk to each other, because that's a massive thing, isn't it? All the different software companies want everything to do what they want it to do, and they don't want anyone else to buy other software. So if they can keep all of their clients in one place, brilliant. But then nobody wants to use one piece of software for everything. So there's always better pieces, better tools for different jobs. So yeah, that's very often an issue that comes up. Coming back to James. Oh, my phone's ringing. There's always one, isn't there? Shush.
It's not making the different pieces of technology speak to each other, Stuart, is the problem there, I think.
It's never happened to me before on these. Right, so very quickly, because I know we're running out of time, and I've got at least 2 questions I really want to come to. The first one is the WhatsApp question, which I think is fascinating. I've also got somebody writing an article at the moment on the same subject, but a question that came up recently was WhatsApp for communication on projects. So is it a good idea for a project to keep your records using WhatsApp as a tool? James?
I think greatest possible deference to it probably misses the point, because it's going to happen. WhatsApp is just too familiar and too convenient. And no matter what humans claim otherwise when they are asked about it, the 2 things that humans prize above all is familiarity and convenience. If you don't agree with me, ask yourself whether or not McDonald's is a successful restaurant worldwide, which it absolutely is. And WhatsApp is a very familiar and very convenient tool. That's why Facebook stopped developing its own rival system and spent $19 billion on buying WhatsApp. Just to put that in context, that was in 2014, before the recent bout of inflation. So that was when $19 billion was a lot of money. But as for the legal implications, I mean, it's going to be there. People are going to use it. They're going to use it whether you like it or not. And generally speaking, tribunals find immediate, unfiltered, contemporaneous records to be the best records of all. Just on a slight digression, but it is relevant. Colleagues of mine still talk about how when the Police and Criminal Evidence Act came in 40 years ago now, 1984, the police were dead against it, because it meant that they could no longer write up interviews from their contemporaneous notes and therefore shape the narrative. Criminals, by contrast, were very much in favour of it, because police officers could no longer, in the time-honoured phrase, verbal them up by claiming that they confessed when their colleague was out of the room. That very quickly changed, and police became absolute devotees of the recorded interview, because it was brilliant to be able to get someone's actual, unfiltered, unguarded thoughts and comments in real time on a permanent record. And WhatsApp is very much of the same species, it seems to me. Whether or not that's a good idea slightly depends on what's in any individual WhatsApp record. But for the purposes of the tribunal being interested in getting at the truth, it's an invaluable record. For the legal team, I mean the extended legal team, experts included for these purposes, there are significant challenges around it. It seems to be harder to use, so far at least, in terms of retrieval of those records after the event. It's harder to use automated software than it is with email. For example, keywords and things don't seem to work as well with it. And that's slightly because people tend to digress and move around in conversations much more than they do in a structured way, where they're passing information back and forth over email. And it seems, therefore, at least at the moment, subject to our great AI question, to need a lot more manual review. So there's a cost and complication in that. It's usually on individuals' phones, and so it's therefore easier to lose, because people leave companies and stuff, and so it's not stored on the server in the same way. Also, people don't always back up. There is, of course, also the problem, which we've seen recently, particularly in the COVID inquiries, of people deleting their chats. And I just went off and found, this is a WhatsApp conversation between Ken Thompson, who was manager of the COVID Coordination Directorate of the Scottish Government, and Jason Leach, who was Scotland's National Clinical Director. Their conversation, retrieved from WhatsApp, went as follows. Thompson, just to remind you, seriously, this chat is discoverable under Freedom of Information laws. Know where the clear chat button is. Answer from someone else on the chat was, yes, absolutely. Thompson, plausible deniability are my middle names. Now clear it again. Thompson later denied, I should say, for completeness, that this was an attempt to defeat requests subsequently made under freedom of information laws. I'll leave the audience to take their own views on that. So whether or not people are going to delete chats as a whole, there's a whole body of law, and we could do a whole podcast about deliberate destruction of documents and document retention. But there does seem to be a problem of people being a bit too candid in WhatsApps. Whether they're going to wise up to that and try and delete them, and whether that creates new problems is another topic in itself. But WhatsApp, generally speaking, there's something that all the lawyers are interested to see. They're always going to want to see. And it tends to be where people's real unfiltered opinions tend to get written down, and therefore subject to plausible deniability, nightly chat clearance buttons, where you can find real gold in terms of working out what the real answer is to a dispute.
Exactly. Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, I think for me, that big issue around the non-central storage of WhatsApp information is the big thing. And obviously, yeah, as you say, I mean, one of the things that you mentioned in our preparation for this was the things like Wagatha Christie and all of those sorts of things where, I dropped my phone in the sea.
3 times.
Finally, and we're just a few minutes over, but this is a really important point as well. Khalid, I'd like to come back to the program. So obviously, I think programming is a big issue on all projects, isn't it? And it's one that causes disputes and keeping the records of time and all of those sorts of things. Is the program, should it be viewed as more of a live record, and to what extent does a well-maintained program increase chances of success if things go wrong on a project?
I agree, actually, Stuart. Like, I think the program is one of the most important records when it comes to a dispute related to the extension of time of the project. What actually happened, what caused the delay to the critical path of the project, or where is actually the critical path of the project. So I think it's really important for the project team to understand the importance of the program at the first instance, and then to further understand that the program is not really the planning engineer's job, as it is the project's team job to make sure that it's representing what actually happened in the site at a certain point of time, so that all the disciplines are happy, satisfied with the input that they have on the program that the planning engineer is inserting to represent the status or the progress of the works at a certain point of time. So it's really important, I think, to be flexible in preparing the programs and understanding how important they are as a contemporaneous record in the program, so that it's important, I think, when a planning engineer preparing a program to make sure that everything is supported with actual records that he was able to obtain from the other project team members, including the engineering team, the construction team, the procurement team, even the testing commissioning team, so that the everything is coming together and supported with evidence. And it's also important for the planning engineer or the planning team to be flexible in changes to the programs if it's required to reflect what's actually happening at the site, and even to fix something that was recorded in the previous months or so in a different way, that they came to understand that no, that's not really the percentage of progress at the current stage, or this needs additional or very, very different type of works or activities or links or relationships. So it's really just to maybe to summarize this, the program is something that needs to reflect the reality at a certain point of time. So let's get all together and try to understand what's actually happening at this point of time, and try to build on it month by month or week by week or whatever is required under the contract, so that it's reflecting the actual status of the works. That will help massively when there's a dispute or when the project is completed, to understand in each point of time or window, as we call it, or monthly basis or whatsoever, what was happening and what was causing delay to the product.
And Stuart, I can add on quickly to that, based on
I was going to say, yeah, I was going to come to you.
Yeah, based on NEC program. So the NEC is very prescriptive when it comes to the program. So every period you have to have an accepted program. And that's very regimented in terms of that accepted program needs to reflect in terms of all the composition events which you have agreed in the period. And it needs to reflect the time that has been agreed, because in NEC contracts, the only thing that can move the completion date in the contract is a composition event. So if you have a time delay in the CE, that time delay has to be factored in the accepted program, and once that accepted program is accepted, it overrides the original baseline program, and you keep on moving that way. So it's very important for people to actually manage the program period by period in order for you to actually capture that. And NEC does that quite well.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that's one of the big features of NEC, isn't it? I remember going to a talk a number of years ago in which the speaker, who shall remain nameless, somebody asked the question, "It's all the same under NEC?" And he said, "Oh yeah, it's the same as JCT. Don't worry about it at all." And I sat there with going, "Not really." And what little I know that that's quite a big feature. So thanks for that. Right, we've got loads of really good questions in the Q&A. Before we finish, I do want to come to one or two of them. One of the words that has been used in there, which I was searching for a minute ago, was interoperability. And there's a guy called Paul Wilkinson, if you look him up on LinkedIn or other places, who does a lot of work with the government and with NIMA, N-I-M-A. He's doing a lot on interoperability of software. So if anybody's interested in generally people are trying to bring different softwares together to work together, he's doing everything on that. So he's a vast fount of knowledge for that sort of thing. What about that's fine. There's some good ones here. Should progress data, here we are, this is a good one for Khalid. Should progress related data be in a form that can be uploaded to a program? So the format of your recorded data, should it fit with your program?
So that's part of the integration that we were talking about earlier. I think there's the basic form of integration, let's say, is between P6, which is the Primavera software that gets integrated with Excel spreadsheets, and yes, it can be uploaded to the Primavera from the Excel and together with the supporting documents. So that's usually the most common form of keeping data from the site in terms of the program updates or progress updates. But the further step, I think, towards the technology usage is that we not only use the Excel sheets, but we try to use a software that is developed to keep the records on the site, that can keep photographs of what's actually happening together with submittals, and then moves this, submitted references, or even the soft copies of the submittals and the responses from the other party as well, and uploads all of this to Primavera P6. So the program is going to be supported by photographs or videos sometimes, together with actual submissions. So that's really one of the improvements, I think, the industry is.
So in answer to the original question ages ago, yeah, technology can help. So yeah, there is an observation as well from Paul Slinger, who said it can be really simple. We once won an adjudication based on photographs taken from a platform that was located away from the site. The subcontractor was entirely unaware of. Main purpose of the photos was a nice time lapse at the end of the project, but that also then demonstrated site conditions that the subcontractor was blaming an extension on time on had actually been resolved before the date they originated their claim. So that's, yeah, so there's all sorts of use of things that these guys obviously hadn't even put that time lapse camera in place to deal with disputes, to deal with the project running to time. But it turned out to be quite handy afterwards when they did have that data. So brilliant. I think we'll leave it there, because there's so much we could talk about, and that's brilliant. Thank you so much to all of you for joining me this morning, and thank you for raising all the other questions that we should cover in future Construction Cast sessions. So thanks for that. Thanks to Chulu, thanks to James, thanks to Khalid, thanks for everybody this morning for joining us on the call. We'll pop this on YouTube once it's all tidied up and saved, and there'll be a podcast that matches it as well. So if anybody missed it, you'll be able to catch up. Annie will be in touch with you very shortly with the next Construction Cast, which hopefully will be towards the end of May. Thank you all very much, and speak to you soon.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you. Cheers.